5:30, we'll start the meeting here for the Finance Committee. Roll call. Yeah, well, that's good. So Dean.
Yep.
Steve.
Yep.
Brian here. What's your name?
Joel.
Joel. Thanks, Joel. All right. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So there's the main reason for the reappropriations for 2024. We've had a few items come up that were not initially in the budget. Our income is considerably higher, as you can see on page 1. Anticipated income, obviously the year's not over, but based on the averages of where we're at. If you look down at the bottom on the total middle column there, we project our income to be about almost $320,000 higher than what we originally anticipated for the year.
Okay.
I've shown changes in each category, whether it's general or what, but the overall income should be up for the year from what we originally estimated. If you move to
So the green is...
the green is positives, the red is negative, and the only one that's in red is the cemetery, which we always over budget for that, because if we don't, we know we're gonna have to redo appropriations, because that's basically an in and out fund. What we collect is what we give to the cemetery association.
Oh, okay.
So if I budgeted $24,000, we would have been in here earlier to adjust appropriations to send that additional $349, because we can't spend. So originally I budgeted $26,000 is what we were gonna bring in. We actually brought in, the taxes are all collected. We brought in the $24,349.68, and that's turned around and has been made up to the.
So this is the amount right there again
This is the amount of revenue, anticipated revenue on the left.
for the projected.
Projected for the whole
Okay.
year. Yep. I mean, the cemetery fund is done. There won't be any more revenue coming in or going out or expense going out of that. So, obviously the big changes was general fund is up, which we can look at each individual fund in relation to, but income wise, it's not really the concern of the meeting. The appropriations is the biggest part of what we need to adjust here. So, I mean, if you guys want to go through each one of those.
I'm just trying to get a grasp of how you got it laid out here. I know I'm just kind of more used to what Amy had. This
Yep.
might be fairly similar.
It's
but
pretty
we just wanna
simple.
make
I'm
sure we're on
using the
page.
same Excel spreadsheet, except for I've run a 3-year average in over here on the right-hand side that wasn't there prior to.
So the middle column's what we're
Well, that's
above,
anticipated income that will be higher than what we originally projected on that.
anticipated above what we projected
Projected.
from last year. Okay,
Correct.
all right.
So, any questions on that first page? If not, really, page 2 is basically the total revenue that would now be available with what was carried over plus the anticipated revenue. Again, it's not, we originally budgeted almost 5.5 million, we're projecting now 5.8 million. So, I mean, that's not, like I said, the income, I will file an amended certificate with the county auditor, but that doesn't have to go through. What I really want to look at is on page 3, or the third page, 2024 expenses. Obviously, I'm going to amend the cemetery fund for the amount of expense that we actually paid out of there, so that's the one that's going down. As far as changes to other budgets, really none of them will be changed on the overall budgeted amount in any fund except for street lighting fund, which we discussed that last year at the Finance Committee meeting. We were wondering if we were going to be able to make it. Initially, we thought we were, but with the 17% increase in utilities this year, we're going to be able to make it through the end of the year, I believe, but I want to be able to transfer $15,000 by the end of the year so we can still be able to pay January's bill before we get appropriations ready for January, if that makes sense to you. So that's the change on the street light fund there. And then the water revenue, with the new rates, we're projecting additional, actually I project more than 75,000, but I raised it for 75,000 by where we're at for the year. So, and then on the deposit fund for utility deposits, initially we had budgeted 2,000 for expense. The reason I'm increasing that to 9,000 was NOCAC donated money to specific individuals that have difficulty paying their utility bills. So it goes into their account, and Val keeps track of how much is for each resident. But when their utility bills come due, she's using that deposit to help pay their bills. So we're going to spend more than the 2,000. We're not spending more, but we're taking it back out of the deposit fund and putting it into the revenue fund on the water side. So that's the reason that line item was increased. But other than that, no other line item increases except for those three funds increased and one decreased on the cemetery fund, for an overall change of expense increase of $83,599.68 versus what we originally budgeted. But like I said, we're projecting about $320,000 more income, so we're still further ahead than what we're going to need to do. On the general fund, you can see what revenues were higher than what. Anything in green is what for sure is already higher, that's already been paid. Anything in red is for sure what's lower, that's done for the year. Blue is indicated with anticipated revenue of what we expect versus what we originally budgeted. And the yellow, which is somewhat hard to read, is income that is a little bit below what we budgeted. But overall, in the general fund, we anticipated, which is hard to read on this page, but if you go back to page 1, it was $87,346 of additional revenue just in the general fund alone. Which actually, after I did this, we just received an additional donation for the splash pad, so that figure is going to be will again be changed, but I mean, we don't need to change it for this year. So, on general fund expenses, first page, no changes to any of the budgeted line items. Page 1, page 2, during the year for advertising, we reduced that a little bit. And I don't think we're going to spend. We originally budgeted $4,500. We needed some additional under dues and subscriptions, so we reduced the advertising by $500. We reduced the council training by $250 to get me the increase of $750 for dues and subscriptions, because we're part of the Ohio Chamber for our health insurance, and those dues were about $750 more than what we anticipated last year. Moving down to land and buildings, obviously the electricity, we are spending more with the increase on utility rates, so I moved $2,000 additional into that. With this new office building here, we've created a line item on the new budget of rents and leases for $4,000 to cover the rent for the rest of this year.
Where was that at again?
That's on right in the middle. Your second green, rents and leases under plans and building.
I see now. That's our projected for this.
That'll be, well, it's $800 a month, which we had the first month was September, October, November, December, so that won't change. It's going to be what the expense will be.
Okay.
We took basically those two out of the engineering services. Brian didn't think he would need the full engineering that we originally budgeted. Increased the contractual services by $400, decreased operating expenses or supplies by $400. We did have some repairs. I don't recall exactly what those were for, but we had to increase the repair line item. And then the capital outlay, we got a grant for this, so the money has already come in. Originally, we budgeted $5,000 for a locator. The grant came in at $8,106, so they used 100% of that grant to buy a new locator system and stuff. So that's why that's been increased.
It's a water meter locator.
It's a water line, an electric line, and everything. So they shouldn't have. Hopefully, with that, when they're doing repairs, they shouldn't have as many issues with property tax collection fees. That advertising is what the county auditor charges us, but we didn't need all of it. We actually needed a little bit more in their collection fees, so we moved the $150 there. Now with the new solicitor being an actual employee of the village, we need to create a line item. So we moved from contractual account or legal fees, the $13,880 that we expect to expend for this, which we shouldn't spend that much unless we go over the 20 hours, but we budgeted extra in case we go over the 20 hours that we cut out every month. So that's what those changes are under the solicitor fees. In the income tax collection fees, I don't expect to spend the full 20. I'm gonna guess we're gonna be about 16,000 to 17,000, but I didn't want to push it close. I figured we'd raise that while we're here. That way we don't have to turn around in December and come back in and.
That's Rita?
That's Rita. That's the amount that they charge to collect our taxes,
I thought they took that right out.
They do, but the way it works, we gotta show the full income, turn around and show the expense comes out. So, on the transfer out, I did reduce on that last page. We reduced that by $15,000, which is kind of where some of these other expenses came from that we budgeted for. But the reason for that was with the new tax levy on the police, we don't need the full $15,000. We originally budgeted $180 to transfer to the police department. We transferred $150 earlier in the year, so there's still $30,000 there to transfer out of the general fund. I will use $15,000 of that for the street lighting, but the other $15,000 we no longer.
Do we need to do on that last transfer for the police department then this year?
No, we won't. They're gonna have plenty, or they should have plenty of revenue for this year.
Okay.
Street street, budget, no, just a little more revenue, not much. We're talking $4,500 additional revenue is what page 1 shows with the 2 green. On the back, we did have to shift, under repairs and maintenance, we had to shift, an additional 500 for repairs and maintenance, and we just took it out of capital outlay. So, I mean, we had some repairs to one of those street lights or something that we had to pay for that we didn't have enough budgeted for. State highway budget, no change on the actual expenses. We do anticipate a little extra income than what we originally had, but I'm not gonna make a change for $800 to the rental certificate, so there's really no change on that. Cemetery fund, we've already discussed, the taxes collected were less than what we originally budgeted. Permissive tax, I anticipate about $2,400 of total revenue additional, but the only thing that was for sure was the local permissive tax that we get from Paulding County. That part is done for the year because that comes in one lump sum when Brian requested. So the only thing I increased was the amount that was more than what we originally, but we had budgeted $6,000, it came in at $7,591. So the other line item, I'm just gonna leave them where they're at when I do the amended certificate. EMS budget, again, there are some incomes that were higher than what we anticipated, but overall, we expect about $2,700 more than what we originally budgeted on revenue. The line items that were changed were due to the fact of some expenses that they came into that we needed some additional income. So,
For the training and the travel?
The training, they originally, Ashley set budget for $7,500 for each of those because she thought there might be a lot more training in person now. The COVID's pretty much done, but as of so far this year, they haven't had much more than what they initially expected. And I don't know what happened to the second page of that. So the extra $2,000 went into, if I recall correctly, I don't know why I didn't print that in front of it, but I went into repairs and maintenance of the building. I think they did some painting on the inside and so on and so forth. So the overall budget stayed, again, we didn't change the overall budgeted amount for the EMS. It was just what line items we put it under. So. Fire budget, principally the same thing. They did receive a grant for $10,000 for some equipment that's already been purchased, so we increased the overall revenue by the $79.21 due to there were some other incomes that they didn't receive that they anticipated. They usually get a marked radio grant to help pay for the radios, but they didn't receive that this year. So,
okay.
On the expense side of the fire, we have reduced some of the expenses down to cover some additional, there again, repairs and maintenance of the building. They did some work on the inside of the building that they wasn't originally budgeted for, and then some of the equipment repairs that they had that were over the original budget amounts. But the overall total was the same as what we originally budgeted for the year. Police department revenue is considerably higher than what we had initially anticipated. So like I said, I removed the $30,000 additional transfer in, but the property tax revenue was up considerable this year. So the overall income for the police was about almost $58,000 more than what we originally budgeted. Obviously, without the additional police officers, which George is still looking for, we have reduced the salary expense that he originally budgeted for. His utilities for other utilities, I believe, is cell phone and like his internet and stuff inside the office. But that we had to put an extra $100 in to cover expenses through the year, and we just took the $100 out of the telephone expense.
So the phone would have been for other officers?
Yeah, they have a special phone for the officers on duty, or cell phone. I mean,
And they're not utilizing that?
Yep. Yeah, so the expense went down. I think actually George went up to AT&T and changed the plan a little bit, but the cost went down. So. The advertising, obviously for advertising for a new officer, we had a lot more than what we normally spend. He ran in the Lima News and all the local newspapers. Tax collection fees were a little bit less than what we anticipated. He did buy some new equipment, and that's where the biggest change from the salary was moved down to the capital, for improvements to the police department. Changes on that. Mayor's Court, we didn't make any changes to the federal Mayor's Court budget. Everything's the same on that. Fire truck levy, they did collect a little more income than what we anticipated, but I'm not making a change on that. Severance pay, we've already made the transfer, no changes there. That's Memorial, we did get a $150 donation for some of the engraving that we had not put in, that's Memorial, so that takes care of that.
They said that fee went up.
That fee did go up, so, and I think it used to be $75 for the engraving, I think it's gonna be like $180 for engraving. So that's something that's gonna have to be addressed, you know, in the future, I'm gonna have new people to that. Brian was gonna take care of that. No changes to that alcohol monitoring, anything on that. FOJ received some, revenue for the furtherance of justice. There was a court case through the county that was a drug-related charge, so that goes into the FOJ funds for
What's up, again?
furtherance of justice. It's a police officer, basically, in the event where George would have to, buy evidence or pay for evidence, it's a fund that he rarely, I think he's used it one time since I've been here. It's one of those things that the money's there in case he would need to pay somebody for evidence or something along those lines. Street lighting, we originally budgeted $20,000 for revenue, between that 19,379, so we're $620 less there. And then I would like to get an ordinance to do the transfer by the end of the year for the $15,000 into the street lighting fund so we can continue to operate in 25. I believe we're going to be close on where we're at. I mean, pretty well breaking even on what was in the fund from last year with what we've collected. But I don't want to go into January and not be able to pay for the street lights on the street fund. So that's the reason I'm going to ask for the transfer on that. So,
Yeah, we gotta have money.
gotta have the money. So, and that there is that operating levy that we have. It's part of it's for street lighting. So it goes into the general fund, and then that's what allows us to transfer that over. George received the state grant for law enforcement training, but no change on the amount of what he anticipates to spend there. Capital improvements, we sold the lot. That's where that income changed. No change on the capital.
Is that one down there?
Yes, the one out here that we sold earlier this year. A water tower grant, which we haven't received all the money yet at this point, but no change on that one. Water revenue, as I mentioned on the first page, we anticipate additional revenue coming into the water fund. Total we anticipate is about $115,000, but I was trying to be conservative, so I only raised it by 102. I mean, I want to make sure over budget, obviously on our income side of things. So that's the revenue side of things. On expenses, as you can see, there's minor changes to when we paid the property. We took $200 out of the property insurance and liability insurance that was not used when we bought the insurance. We added $2,000 to operating supplies for under pumping. I think they had to buy some, I don't remember exactly what it was, but and then on the repairs and maintenance, we did reduce that $1,600. That covers the $2,000 on the pumping section. So nothing out of the pumping changed on the overall expense. It's just, again, we just moved some things from one line item to the next. On other expenses for water, we lowered land improvements because we've only done one project up there. They had a lot of expenses there. We increased capital outlay. They did purchase some pigtails for the new digital read water meters and that was just over the $5,000 we originally budgeted, so that's where the $125 is. Here is the change that, so since the water tower project is complete, the guys in the utility department want to start working on doing the replacement for the auto read meters instead of having to go out and do, they'll just be able to drive down the street and they'll populate it in the computer and then it'll send it to Val for billing. They need, if I recall correctly, approximately 400 some of those meters. They've already got some of them installed. To purchase like 225 of them, it come in at, it was like $72,000 or $73,000 for a 10-year warranty. If they do a 5-year, I think they were, if I recall correctly, like $60,000 or an 8-year warranty. So I'm not sure which way Brian's going to go, but the estimate was, so that's where that $75,000. They want to get started on that project here before it goes to freeze this year, so they can start changing out some of those meters. So that's another thing, another reason that the overall increase to the water appropriations.
So they're just on it. I mean, they started that project.
They started part of that last year. They ordered some meters last year, and they've got most of those installed. But they think they can get about approximately, well, if weather holds up, maybe get another 200 of them done this year.
year.
Okay, gotcha.
So obviously it depends on whether.
Optimistic, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, we're gonna have to buy the 400 eventually, so buy part of them now and then part of them next year, so.
Gotcha.
Sewer revenue, we do project that to be approximately 21,000, well, about almost 30,000 higher than what originally was budgeted, but I raised it about 29,000. On the sewer appropriations, there were minor changes, obviously. We haven't spent as much for natural gas as the telephone bill. I think on cell phones, they had to purchase a new cell phone because one got damaged, so we had to increase the budget there. Or I don't know if it got damaged, I think it was Chris's. It got so old that when he answered the phone, people couldn't hear him talk. So they had to get a new phone, so he could text with it, but I think it was an iPhone 7 or 8.
Sure.
Got a new phone. On the professional technical service, that is for, I think it's clear what they do with the testing of the water, mapping labs. I mean, that's,
Sure.
that expense went up just like everything else did, so the budget was not capable to handle the amount of expenses that we anticipate at the end of the year, so we raised that. But again, the overall budget that we had originally, the 541,042 did not change. It's just a matter of moving from one line item to the next. On trash collection or refuse, we do anticipate a little bit higher income than we originally budgeted. Approximately, if things keep going, I mean, about 7,000, but we raised the income 5,000, but the expense should still fall at 65. I know Brian's working with.
I guess I'm wondering why our revenue would be going up on that.
Well, I don't
Few
know.
more houses.
I don't know exactly why that is. That's just what I took the 9 months, divided it by 3, and then took the total, divided by 9, took it times 12. So that may not be much higher, but the way things have been, I think it'll be higher than what we originally budgeted. But
Okay.
the actual expense is going to be about the same. I know Brian is working with was it Real Waste
Yeah.
to work on a contract. I think in April the other one's up.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be
And
coming up.
it is,
We'll
I
see
think
what
the
they-
price is gonna go up on that, but I know Brian was working with them to try to get something worked out.
I think we're still in contract with them, we can accept their, I don't think we have to put it out for bid yet.
I don't know if we'll have to now because the Ohio Revised Code raised that to 75. So if they come in under 75,000,
We're
we
still
won't
good.
have to open it up for bids, but I mean, it'll depend on what they come in at of the bid
Okay.
price on
I
that.
hope not, they do a good job.
Yep. Compost, we may have a little bit more income than what we budgeted, but I did not change that. And we have contracted, or got a purchase order out for the compost pile chipped up, but
Huge out there.
and they've tried that Go Green last year. They never showed up. They've got somebody else that's supposed to, or maybe it's Go Green again. They're supposed to come this fall to do it. So
They're out there now.
Oh, they're out there working
Yeah.
on them? Okay, good deal. I know the PO was issued for that, and Brian.
They got,
I took some
Miles.
recycling out there and it was like a forest.
So that was an estimate of 15,000, what that's gonna cost, but who knows?
Sure.
As big as the pile is. Storm, I don't think we made any changes to storm except for, it looks like the income may be higher than what we budgeted, but I didn't change that. Same with the deposit fund. Now, we did, I guess, increase the deposit revenue fund by, so the $9,480 is basically the no-cap deposit that was made for individuals in town. So that's why we won't use it all up this year, but I did increase the deposit supplied expense line item by $7,000 to cover what we anticipate will be used this year. Mayor's Court, revenue's down at this point, but who knows what's gonna happen in the last 3 months of the year. So with the new officer, maybe we'll get back to where we were. So that is the changes that I would like to make, and I'd like to present a resolution, I don't know what resolution number it was, I think I wrote it down. Resolution 2024-18 to amend appropriations, and obviously that would be as an emergency, so we can pay the expenses that are coming due. So, if you guys can, everybody in favor of recommending that.
absolutely.
Yeah, we can make that motion and see what happens. I'm sure it'll go.
He's put on, he's added 2 additional officers to date, correct?
One.
Only one.
He's out at a full-time officer. He has Jared Hogan's, who was in here prior.
Right.
he's doing a lot more work now, because he's got a little more free time now that his kids aren't doing softball and stuff like that.
Okay.
So he's been working more hours, so.
Yeah, and then
Alec Ingram is the new officer. Yeah, he took over for Damien when Damien left and went to a different.
I think I've seen him out and about, he's been busy.
Yes.
yes, he is.
Yep. So, as far as 2025 appropriations go, item 4 on the agenda. If you look at the revenue, overall revenue that we anticipate for the next year, I got the 3-year average next to each fund. Basically, I kind of tried to stay somewhat conservative on the average for revenue, like I did last year, so we may be low again, but I would rather be on the conservative side than guess that we're gonna have higher income and not have it. So, obviously, our revenue is gonna be down compared to the 3-year average because we don't have the COVID money on the 3-year average. We're not gonna have, which we don't know if there's gonna be additional grants, which we'll fix that when we go to the permanent appropriations. But for temporary, Brian's looking to try to get grants for possibly the Canal Wentworth and that stuff, that we've got the engineering pretty well complete on that. But as of now, we don't know if there's gonna be any grants or anything on that side of stuff. So the income's down again, almost 600,000 for the water tower. We obviously don't have that budgeted and other things. So, any questions on the revenue for next year? Anticipated revenue? In Mayor's Court again, I do budget higher than what the 3-year average is, I guess, because if we collect more, then we won't be able to transfer the money. So, I mean, I don't want to have to make a special trip in, or have you guys come in to do that. I mean, if we can avoid it, we always budget high. That's the only one that I budget high on. So with those revenues plus what I anticipate to carry over in the funds, that leaves us with a total budgeted amount of just under 5 million, 4.97 of available funds for appropriations next year. On the expense side of things, which we'll get to each fund in detail as why it's higher than the others, but or the 3-year average. Obviously, with the expenses going up, some of them have to go up for electric and that, so on and so forth. We don't know if we'll move forward, but if we would happen to get the sale of the depot, the capital improvement funds, obviously we don't anticipate spending it for sure, but if something would come up where we can start building a building or something, we want to make sure it's appropriated. So that's why that's included in there under 4901. And on the police, which we'll get into that in greater detail. 2903 is higher than the 3-year average. George still would like to get another full-time officer on duty, so that, you know, the large increase on that was due to salary, and then there's going to be some other discussion on that later when we get into compensation of employees. But so total expenses estimated or projected would be 3.265 million. This is basically just showing what we anticipate for revenue in the general fund. Total income should be right around 600,000 for next year. And then we hopefully will have about $745,000 of carryover, which would put us at 1.38 million available to appropriate. On the general fund expenses, one of the big changes in the Parks and Recreation section on page 1, where you'll see a notation for the splash pad. Brian is currently working with an individual who's got the license to operate the splash pad. We did obviously turn it on for, a week I think, and to operate it, we went through roughly $1,000 of chemicals in 1 week. So we're kind of budgeting around $5,000 a month to operate that during the months. So 6 months out of the year, that's where the $30,500 comes into play on the contractual services. Because what Brian's hoping to do is buy the chemicals and just have this gentleman to do all the maintenance and everything for it. So, and that's where that line item comes into place. I don't know if anything will happen with it, but Brian is gonna look into, and I don't know if this is enough, he's gonna get me better figures later when we get to the permanent budget, but maybe doing away with a couple of the shelter houses to help save on insurance and just build one big nicer new one, because we've got several small ones out there that aren't utilized, so, at the park. So that was an idea that he had. Let's see, everything else is basically based off of a 3-year running average. And obviously a little bit of increase for electricity over what we initially spent, except for on the land and buildings, reduce the electricity, because obviously if the sale goes through on the depot, we won't be paying for the electric out there at that office. So, and again, these are all temporary appropriations. When we get to the permanent side of things, we can make it a little better fine tuned. As far as transfers this year, they won't be near as high out of the general fund, or we don't anticipate them to be near as high as they were last year with the engineering on the water plant and everything. Looks like we're probably gonna need approximately $50,000 for the police department, and then the street lighting. You know, if the expenses stay where they're at, we collect what we've been collecting, we're probably gonna need another $10,000 during the year out of the general fund for street lighting. So that's where the $60,000 comes in, police. Street budget, with our anticipated revenue and carryover, it looks like we'll have about $165,000 available for expense. Everything, again, we're going on 3-year averages. Looks like appropriations will be around $153,000. So if, I know there was a chance this year that we were going to, I don't remember what road it was. We actually had a PO made out for it, but Brian canceled the contract to pave it because there's talk about redoing a water line or something.
Where was that?
Was it Bill? I don't remember what street it was. But anyways, the reason it didn't get done this year is because they're gonna do some water line work, and I think they may have to tear up the road a little bit. So basically, let's wait instead of putting money in Mervyn Street. It was, that's where it was at, yes. Mervyn Street was the one. So the capital outlay, usually that's around 25 to 30,000, but next year Brian's hoping to maybe do 2 roads, so we put that up at 55,000, so that's a little bit higher than what we normally budget. But you know, last year in 23 we spent like 82,000 doing part of what wasn't covered under the grant up here on Railroad Street and some of the other roads in the paved. So you know, we didn't spend anything this year, so next year's budget will be a little bit higher, with hopefully maybe doing more than one road. State highway budget, everything's pretty much in line on the expenses. Looks like we're gonna have, with carryover and revenue next year, approximately 15,300 or 400 available, and we budgeted 14,000. I know they're gonna start the 49 paving project. I don't know if there'll be any expenses from the village on that part of it, or if that'll all be covered through the state, or how that's gonna work. So I know when they get to phase 2 of that, I think there's gonna be some expenses for the village, but I don't know about phase 1 when they grind down for the crews and everything.
Yeah, we
I
wanted
think
to
that
do
was,
some extra stuff.
yep, so.
That won't be this year.
That won't be in 25, so with this, Brian may not even spend what's budgeted, but I mean, again, if we don't budget it, we can't spend it if something would come up and happen, so. Cemetery fund stayed the same figures I had last year, I budgeted at 26,000. Obviously, we don't know what the exact revenue is gonna be off the real estate taxes, but it should be around 24,000, like is what we've been collecting, so hopefully I'll get the budget high enough that we can pay those expenses when things go through. Permissive, that's also used for street pavement projects and sidewalks and so on and so forth. We should have approximately 10,000 carryover after this year, and that leaves us with about almost 34,000 available for expenses, and we budgeted 30,000 for repairs and stuff to the sidewalks and roads and stuff. EMS budget, I asked Ashley and Bob at the fire department to get me information. Unfortunately, I haven't heard back from them, so I stuck with what the budget was from 24, other than obviously some raises to some of the operating expenses that we knew were higher this year for electric and so on and so forth. But total available for EMS is 297,000. We budgeted 103. No, excuse me, 179. Very bottom of page 1.
Yeah.
It kind of cut off down where it was printing. Vehicle replacement, to my knowledge, unless Ashley tells me that they're making a plan to purchase one, I don't think they're going to be budgeting to buy a new EMS vehicle next year, so I just left that at 0. So when we do the permanent appropriations, we'll get that changed if we need to. Fire budget, with with what we expect to carry over and revenue, anticipated revenue next year, it looks like we'll have about $82,745 available. I did reduce some of the budget on that until I talked to Bob. Not sure what they had planned, but came in at $77,150. Last year we were budgeted at $83,000. So if they expect to stay at the same budget level, we'll probably have to initiate a transfer from the general fund to help the fire department out, because the revenue they're going to be collecting, unless they get a grant or something along the way, probably won't cover the operating expenses if they would expend the full budget. But at least we can get started next year paying bills temporary. Police budget, as you can see, the amount of expenses under revenue with the $50,000 transfer plus what we expect to carry over puts it at $378,755. The biggest line item change are your top 3 or 4 line items, which is your salary, your OPERS, Medicare, basically your compensation of people. As I mentioned, George hopes to hire another full-time officer, and as well as see if he can find some more part-time people to come in and fill in, for vacations. So that's the reason those line items are increased, which brings the overall budget to $331,000. The computer fund for the mayor's court, again, that'll depend on how much mayor's court fees come through, but we figure roughly around $300 of income, and maybe higher, maybe lower. With what we expect to carry over, $751. Basically supplies for the computer and such, we budgeted before, about as much as we put out of the fund, $650. So for postage and that stuff for mayor's court.
What's Baldwin?
Well, the Baldwin General Mayor's Court is the software they use,
Okay.
which that's about $1,800 a year. So actually, I did increase part of it. I mean, we won't be able to cover that out of the computer fund. We won't have enough probably, but I took part of it out of the Mayor's Court section of general.
Divided it up.
Yep, divided it up. Fire truck levy, we don't anticipate any expenses. Bob has not got back with me. We intend to purchase anything, so I didn't budget anything for the fire truck. Severance pay, I kind of did the math, I think we've still got enough money in the fund. Anticipate, there's really only 2 employees that are eligible for that at this time. And only one of them's old enough, so I budgeted what, if one of them were to leave, one that's old enough were to leave, what he would get paid on the severance package. That's memorial, we don't know how many we're gonna have, but I budgeted $600 for engraving. No expenses budgeted for the indigent alcohol monitor or for the indigent driver. Well, we did on the indigent, we budgeted what the carryover in case we would have to buy equipment for alcohol monitors and such. FOJ, again, that's that fund, furtherance of justice fund, you never know what we're gonna expend. Typically, we only average, 23 they spent $500, 22 and 24, no expenses came out of it, so, but you never know what you're gonna run into. Street lighting for next year, I again budgeted $20,000 of income from county taxes, $10,000 transferred from the general, total revenue of $30,000. With the $15,000 transfer at the end of the year, I anticipate roughly $15,800 being carried over to give us $45,000 to operate next year. Depending on what electric utility rates do, I mean, I know we've signed a contract to lower our rates, but I mean, if the overall price goes up, then I budgeted $35,000. I think we're going to spend about $34,000 this year, so hopefully with the decrease in our new contract, that should cover it. Law enforcement training, that's just what Georgia has available if they would go through specific training through the state. Capital improvement projects, again, that would be if the sale goes through Home Depot, and if that's what money would be left in that account. I don't anticipate there would be an expense that comes out of that, but if the village had something, improvement that they want to do to lands and so on and so forth, that would be where that money would come out of for next year. As of now, we don't have a Department of Development infrastructure grant, so that's zeros on that page. Water, based the revenue off of what we anticipate for 24, what we had, and then with what I expect to carry over, which is about $838,000 in the water fund. Overall expenses, we pretty much kept everything in line with what we've had in the past, except for I did remove the Last year, we budgeted $400,000 for engineering for the water treatment plant. I took that out of the budget for now. Chemicals, I did increase that. On the filtration, I increased that. Last year, we had budgeted at, I think, $40,000. We're gonna be really close to that. That's the chlorine and such that they put into the water treatment plant. I did budget under capital outlay, and again, these figures are strictly estimates of $250,000 for capital outlay there. I don't know what that project will cost for the canal wetland.
Engineering.
Well, not engineering, if the project actually starts, so.
Okay. Yeah, you said the engineering's about done.
The engineering, I think the last time I got an invoice was 94% complete on that, so they should be done by the end of the year on the engineering, so Brian hopes to move forward with that project next year. And we did throw in, again, for the meters, another $25,000 for next year. Revenue for sewer, you can see we projected revenue about $320,000, carry over 216, leaves us at 537. Available for appropriations, we budgeted 353, so that'll leave us about the same 200,000 carryover. Part of that, again, for the sewer was, last year we took the $200,000 line item out for engineering of the water treatment plant, because obviously if there's no water, there's no sewer, so we used part of it out of there. But we also, so that's how that budget's been.
Do we have anything in sewer for improvements to meet that EPA?
We put $20,000 in capital outlay, which Brian is still waiting on the cost benefit analysis study to be completed on that, to submit something to the EPA to see what they're gonna require us to do. So we have no idea what the requirements are gonna be. So again, on a temporary budget, we put $20,000 in there. It may not be enough,
Okay.
but
It's something to get started.
something to get started. Trash, revenue, looks like we've got about 63,000 every year, so that's what I put in for budget for income. Usually carry over right around, say about 15,000. Brian thinks the contract will increase next year, so I budgeted it right at 75 with hopes they come in under the state ORC
If they go
force account.
10%, it's another $6,000 or whatever.
Yeah, if they increase it 10%, you're gonna be looking at 70.
15%, it's
Yeah, so I have no idea. Obviously Brian's working on them,
10
but
grand.
they got, I think they got till April, so I don't know when he'll be done with getting that done. I know he's talking to them, but I'm not sure where he's at. Compost, same as typical, budgeted 11,000 income and 15,000 for expense to get it ground up, so. Storm sewer, revenue I kept for 3-year average, typically falls. Carryover is I'm hoping will be about 109,000, which leaves us 154,000 available for expense. We budgeted 126,000, and 100,000 of that for storm sewer is for that canal network.
Yeah.
Plus the water lines, part of that's gonna be storm, so.
right.
Deposit fund, Cal has not heard anything from NOCAP whether they're gonna, the money they gave last year was, I should have said it was a carryover from some COVID money that they had to expend before this year was up, so I don't anticipate that next year, so I moved everything back to where we're normally at. We usually get somewhere around $1,000 a year in deposits, and typically, the reason I did budget a little bit higher because of the carryover that may be in the fund, that way if it's for those individuals, it's a no-cap deposit, we'll be able to expend it, we won't have to adjust next year's budget. Mayor's Court, I've done what we've done always, 26,000 on anticipated revenue and, the expenses for payment to the state and county and payment to the village. Everybody okay with the temporary budget?
Good.
So again, I guess we'll probably be one making the finance report meeting, so if you can make our recommendation on, and that will be a 3 reading. I'll have a resolution for that, 3 readings, so we get it done before the end of the year, move into next year.
And then we'll do the original one in what, January?
Probably January, so it's done before April 1st. It's gotta be done before, no, it's gotta be done by April 1st. So if we get it done at the January meeting, we should have time for 3 readings,
Okay, so this was our solution to do an emergency.
To do an emergency,
appropriations all the time.
correct.
Okay, I like it.
All right, at this time, I think we need to make a motion to move to executive session to just consider compensation of public employees under Ohio Revised Code 121.
I'll move we go into executive session.
Second.
And roll call. Dean,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes, sir.